Politics is not just about politicians. It's about the way we live, the way we relate. It's about how the government shares its resources with its people. We don't even know the law. We are so focused on where our next meal is coming from, but we don't know who is in charge of the food security.
Welcome to Climate Champions at Work. Sibambene, we are united. A 5-part podcast series sharing information, insights and inspiration from the project fostering inclusive growth through climate change champions. Implemented by Democracy Works Foundation, the project aims to support collaborative partnerships between community-based organizations, civil society organizations, local governments, and independent power producers. In line with the Just Transition framework, the aim of our work is to use opportunities presented by international mitigation efforts for social and economic development and local adaptation initiatives. In the Northern and Western Cape provinces, people are already severely affected by climate change, though it is often not framed as such. Floods, wildfires, droughts, and heat waves are some of the impacts communities are struggling with, on top of persistent development challenges. Since 2021, Democracy Works Foundation has worked closely with local communities and key stakeholders to learn from and build capacity around integrating climate change challenges into the local government and private sector planning and decision-making. This podcast series is dedicated to the loving memory of Chrissy Williams, a tireless advocate for community welfare and a devoted climate change champion. Sadly, Chrissy passed away shortly after recording her interview. Sibambene means we are united. This is a story about community-based climate change champions in the Northern and Western Cape. In today's episode, we delve into how civil society can take advantage of the development opportunities in the renewable energy sector. We focus on independent power producers, or IPPs, who play a central role in combating climate change and are required to offer socioeconomic development, SED, and enterprise development, ED, funding to local communities within a radius of 50 kilometers that they operate. This is an opportunity for civil society. In order to unlock it, however, collaborative partnerships, working together in coordination and government guidelines are key. Jolene Shaw from Knowledge Bill shares her insights with our climate champions on what is required to access these IPP funds. Jolene is the general manager of the Knowledge Bill business within Bill Energy Group. Her work is focused on building sustainable communities. She points out that they look for existing structures, meaning it is important for CSOs to make themselves and their work visible within the municipality as well as on public platforms.
And there's different ways in which this can be done. As I said, when we generally enter a community, we are required to go through a municipality structure, and often we find we get the information for what structures are currently present in your community through a municipality structure. So we would find out that there are existing working groups or there are existing registered entities that could assist us, because the idea behind doing the community needs assessments, doing the research, is not to do it from scratch. To literally, we do household surveys, but it's also to what are the existing structures within a particular community and how do we access them? So I think one of the first points might be to have a registered structure that is acknowledged as an existing representative structure, civil society structure of the community, right? In some instances, if the municipalities are not the most ideal structure to work through, we have put together working groups, right? So these are people that represent the project, but also it's a two-way thing. Help us to understand what are the continued needs of the organization. So to access the working group, right, is also a way to get through to an IPP if that is the structure that they're utilizing.
Jolene advises that CSO engagement and partnerships with stakeholders, such as the municipality where possible, will grow awareness, support, and impact, and increase sustainability.
Maximize impact by utilizing stakeholder engagement as a vehicle to enhance economic development, growth, and job creation. This could be in partnering with the relevant organizations, creating that co-creation with the community, but also with other entities within a particular area. And then lastly, to explore economic multipliers to increase overall economic participation, right? So working together to ensure that we expand what we're able to do with the little that is there, but maximizing it to create sustainability.
For Mabato Mabiga from the Mpumelelo Youth Movement, the idea of community-funded initiatives located within a 50-kilometer radius of an IPP project does not work in some areas.
So, Northern Cape is vastly populated, right? It's an arid area, and there are places where there are no people. But then that 50-kilometer radius falls within those places, and then we just go on with life as if it's okay. So, firstly, how do they come about to the decision of 50-kilometer radius? That's number one. Number two, can't we revise and have another conversation about it? Because then it means that the impact is going to be concentrated in certain areas, while other areas get plunged into poverty more and more and more. And it defeats the purpose of impact then.
According to Oratilwe Ganyane from Knowledge Pele, some IPPs are not entirely set on a 50-kilometer radius for community projects.
The IPP office is very flexible when it comes to the 50-kilometer radius, but it's also dependent on the actual IPP to submit that information that, listen, we've got a community that's maybe 70 kilometers out, and we would like to support that community, or the local or the district municipality has requested that we focus on that community and maybe leave out the one that's closest to the IPP. So they're very flexible, but it depends on the IPP itself.
While climate change champions need and would welcome IPP funding, they explain that reporting requirements place great strain on the organization's already limited capacity, especially in more rural areas. CSOs are the ones that are providing many essential services where the government fails. They often do not have institutional structure to adhere to and even show up on the radar of IPPs, who are seeking more organized formations. As much as they want to include climate change into their work, CSOs often don't have the capacity to do so. Investment into the capacity of CSOs, especially those that are providing critical services, can build the reach and impact and allow them to work towards assisting their constituencies to adapt to climate change, as per the Just Transition Vision. Mabato Mabiga points out that they need more dialogue with IPP decision makers.
Having been funded by a trust before, an IPP trust before, capacity building was a big issue for us, because you go to communities that work at grassroots level, and we have limited staff, limited resources, and we try to limit our beneficiaries because we don't have capacity. So is capacity building a theme when you're doing your engagements with communities? And if so, how do we gain access to it? Because we communicate with the admin staff of the trust, and then we don't communicate with the relevant people. So it stifles a bit, and then we don't get what we need. In their quality assurance or monitoring and evaluation, we don't speak to the relevant people. We speak to admin staff that then, I don't know if they even take our messages forward, and then nothing happens. So because we don't have access to the decision makers or access to the people that are impactful, we then do not create impact. So also like financial management and mentoring of organizations because they give you an X amount of money and they have their own templates when it comes to reporting that we are not familiar with. And then they are on your neck when it's time to report. But we don't have the capacity because we're doing 50 million things in a day. So my first question is around that, the capacity building responsibility of the IPPs.
Jolene Shaw agrees and points out that there should be some guidance on what evidence should be in the reports that come from projects facilitated through the social economic development spend of IPPs.
Yeah, capacity building is certainly something that I've seen being supported across different IPs. We ourselves do capacity building for our entities. But at the end of the day, it's difficult because you can't speak to every IPP strategy. Everyone is different. And it goes to my point where there needs to be a lot more guidance from the Renewable Energy Program itself, from the government itself, to say these are this is what is coming out of communities. This is the need that they have, right? I can say that some are doing it well and some are not. In terms of access, everything has to be reported, especially on a trust level, at the board meetings, right? So the hope is that your reporting and everything else that you filter through to these entities is seen at that level. I'm an advocate for the evidence-based reporting because I do think that it helps the organization to stand behind what they're doing on a report, because you're very right, you can't always have access to whoever. So if your report can reflect truly what is happening on the ground, I do think that is a good way to reflect that. And it might just be a case of being capacitated in evidence-based reporting or in M&E and learning those skills or sharpening those skills.
Brenda Snyders from the Rural Development Support Program in the Western Cape emphasizes that meeting funder requirements is vital, but cautions civil society organizations to hold on to their vision and mission and to reflect the needs in their communities. She also stresses the need for dialogue and engagement with IPPs and local governments to avoid shifting development priorities to access resources which may be misaligned with the needs of sectors and of the community.
There's a power imbalance, that obviously the IPPs have the money, and when the communities, when there's a call for a request for an application, they apply. So what happens is that some of the organizations, or you get organizations that get started because they are chasing the money. So you would hear in a community that, when there's a call for gender-based violence, then suddenly 90% of the organizations is focusing on gender-based violence because they want the funding. The next year, it might be youth or ECD, and then suddenly there's 10 new ECDs that is established within the community. So there's great competition for resources, as we know, especially in the sector, because the funding pool is getting smaller. So people are, what we call mission creeping. It's not about, they don't focus on a specific thing, but they follow the money.
Annually, IPPs produce an economic development plan, which identifies the socio-economic development needs of the communities in which they work. This plan also informs which kind of projects will get funded. But sometimes it is difficult to access this plan. Nonetheless, Brenda urges civil society organizations to work towards influencing this plan.
The economic development plan is also not a public document yet. It is based on the communities that they serve. So where do they get the information that they put into that economic development plan? So that is why one of the things we said is that we need to know who is the economic development manager so that we can speak to this person. And this could also be someone in the community, or it could be a consultant, if I remember correctly, that was appointed to draft that. So, you might get someone sitting in Cape Town writing an economic development plan for Daniel scale. or for Nababi, someone who's maybe never been to the area, who doesn't know the layout, the distances, what is the resources, but they develop an economic development plan. So one of the challenges is to identify that person and then to see, because what we've also learned is that when they start these IPPs, they need to consult with the community, the municipality, key role players. And then, who are those people that they consulted with?
Easy access to relatable information about the assets within communities is part of the coordination gap of the social economic spend sector. In the Northern Cape, the IPP office did not view oversight of IPP's social economic development spend as part of their work. There is a need for policy-based guidelines for platforms where social performance practitioners and economic development managers can meet with CSOs. IPPs currently have free rein and very little guidance on how to conduct their social and economic development spends. For Victor Sako from the Diocese HIV and AIDS Ministry, it is very important that the community and community-based organizations should actively engage with IPPs to make sure that public accountability structures are put in place and working to meet their needs.
These IPP projects, there are two important components with which they normally comes with. The one is the community steering committees. What we have also find is that some of these committees are not functioning anymore. You will find that initially when the IPP was in process and the construction phase was there, you would have find that there was a steering committee identified in the community, and that steering committee does have a specific role during the construction and even the operation phase. But what we found is that in some communities, this structure doesn't exist anymore. So the IPPs doesn't have someone to report to in terms of community issues and all those of things. So that is one area that we need to work into as community organizations.
Working in isolation does not allow us to learn and improve the approach, nor does it allow people to re-examine and redefine what the desired outcomes of interventions should be from a variety of perspectives. Only by building strong alliances and collaborative networks can one ensure that the climate change agenda is set by the communities most affected. Brenda notes that the need for greater coordination also applies to the community-based organizations who want to access funding. She stresses that a lot more can be achieved by breaking down silos.
We also need to work in a more coordinated way, because small, towns are small. You can't have 10 people all running in different directions, but we need to move away from the scarcity mentality that we don't want to share and we don't want others to have, and we need to work in a coordinated way. I also heard recently someone saying, we don't get the money from the IPPs because they're saying, you are 7 people in this town doing the same thing, applying for the same thing. Why are you not working together? So in a way, we are being a disadvantage. We're shooting ourselves in the foot. So we need to work more in a coordinated way. Yeah, also to pull resources, we have the tree with the skills. So let's do that in our community and look at who has what skills and let different people do different things. Instead of saying we can't do this because we don't know how, find someone that knows how to do it. And you will find that person in your own community.
Motivated and inspired, the climate change champions decided to build a united front to advance their work, and they started planning how this platform could work. Tandiwe Kepalet from Activate in Springbok, Northern Cape, explains.
We have decided to start a Climate Justice Action Committee for the Northern Cape. The format will be membership-based with a committee rep from each of the 5 districts. We know we have 5 districts in the Northern Cape. In terms of reference, no bureaucracy, no funding. It is strictly an advocacy committee based in the Northern Cape. We can have associates and allies in other provinces, no decision-making power, but they can advise. The areas of focus will be disaster management, food security, IPP funding and green economy, waste management, mitigation, climate change literacy, and climate justice.
Whether you are an individual, organization, government, or business, everyone is affected by climate change. Everyone has a role to play. Everyone has a contribution to make. In episode 4, we look at how civil society can practically develop participation in local government structures and strengthen their climate change cause. Until next time, stay cool. This podcast is brought to you by the Democracy Works Foundation with co-funding from the European Union. Its contents are the sole responsibility of Democracy Works Foundation and do not necessarily reflect the views of the European Union. For more information about climate change and how CSOs and local government officials can benefit from the just transition process, please visit www.democracyworksfoundation.org/FIGCCC.